We all have New Year's resolutions. At least I know I do. And statistically, like statistically, it says that people tend to give up on their New Year's resolutions after the first 2 weeks of January. I hope you guys are still pushing strong, you know, going to that Planet Fitness that you made a membership to at the beginning of the year. Personally, I'm waiting until the 2 weeks is over so it's not as packed in the Planet Fitness. At least that's what I tell myself. But, you know, other people, you guys might have like completely different year's resolutions, just eat healthier, get more sleep, whatever it is. One of my New Year's resolutions this year is actually to just read the Bible more than I did last year, and also just like understand what I'm reading a bit more, because sometimes I'm just like reading, but then I'm like, it's just like in and out, not like the fast food, but like it's in one ear and then out the other, like when I read the Bible. And it's just like, that's why like I'm trying to do like more devotionals too, just so I actually understand what I'm reading. But that's like one of my New Year's resolutions, and I'm like I said earlier, statistically, the average person gives up on their New Year's resolution after the first 2 weeks of January. And low-key, it's kind of attacking me right now, It's like, it's really hard to keep this resolution. But like, it's tough. It's tough, and it's okay. But like, with this said, I also won't lie. I actually struggled a lot trying to come up with like what to talk about for this week. But yeah, every year at BMC/AGC, BMC being our like regular services upstairs, for the Indonesian community, and AGC, which is you guys, we have like a yearly theme. And this year we have the theme of harvest, of great harvest. And for January, the specific theme of the month is to sow your seeds. Can everyone say sow your seeds? Sow your seeds. Okay. And with this theme, I decided to talk about, to go into Matthew 13, verses 1 through 13. And I really don't know why, but like as I was actually reading these verses, like I just stared at it. Like I read it a few times and I just stared at it, just like blank. I'm just like in my head, just like, God, what the heck did I just read, bro? I'm like, these are words, okay, they sound good, but like, what does it mean for me, And I want to say that maybe that happens to a lot of you guys. You guys are on your walk with God. You guys are, listening to sermons. You guys are reading the Bible, or even going to Bible study, AGL, whatever it is. Like, we talk about a lot of things, and for some of you guys, it might just be like, it's going in one ear and out the other. Probably sounds just like a bunch of hoopla, just a bunch of mumbo jumbo about Christianese, I want to say. And like, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And honestly, we're not the first, like even the disciples back then, like they were questioning Jesus, like, Jesus, what are you trying to say with these words? Like, why are you using so much illustrations that it kind of made us confused too, And the disciples were like the closest people to Jesus, And for a lot of us, like maybe these sort of like times when we don't understand the word, or when we don't understand like what Christianity is, actually like it sometimes becomes a stumbling block and actually makes us just, slow down our walk with God. Maybe you have the New Year's resolution to read the Bible more, but you don't understand a few verses. So I'm just like, it's getting kind of boring. I kind of don't want to do it anymore. But today we're just gonna read from Matthew 13, verse 1 through 9. And we can open that up. And I'm gonna stop yapping and let's just get into the word. Can we actually read these verses together? 1, 2, 3. Later that same day, Jesus left the house and sat by. So he got into a boat. Then he sat there and taught as the people stood on the shore. He told many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen, a farmer went out to plant some seeds. As he scattered them across his field, some seeds fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plants soon wilted under the hot sun. And since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still, other seeds fell on fertile soil, produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Bro, that last verse is just like Jesus just like telling the people he was preaching to just like, if you're hearing me, you should understand. But I'm here like reading these verses. I'm just like, yes, God, I'm trying. Please. But yeah. You guys are probably even more confused because, like, why is there a lot of farming analogy? What are we talking about? Seeds? What are we talking about? Seeds dying or just like a farmer and all that? And that's okay. And when you look at the Bible, a lot of the sermons that Jesus did whenever, like, he preached in different towns to different groups of people, he used a lot of parables, you know? If you guys don't know what parables are, they are pretty much just illustration that help the speaker to convey a message. And yeah, well, in today's sermon, it's actually going to double up as kind of a biblical study as well. So if you're into the nerdy stuff of the Bible, this is your day. If it's your first time here, you'll learn something new too about the Bible. And I hope it interests you guys to keep learning about the Bible. With that said, my sermon title for today is More Than Dirt. Can we say that together? More than dirt. Now look at your neighbor, tell them you're more than dirt. Gosh, I love making you guys say stuff. I'm like, it's like so much fun up here. You guys should try it. Like I said before, I had writer's block this week while reading these verses. Like, I was just like blank while I was reading these verses. Just completely didn't know what I should talk about for you guys. And like, not just me, maybe, like I said before, you guys might read the word. You're probably in one of those. If you guys already read the Bible through and through, you guys probably already read Numbers and Deuteronomy, which is a lot of laws and also like what is that called? Lineages of like, this man was the son of this man who had a daughter, who is this lady who had a son, who is this man. And it's just like, just lists of names that you can't even pronounce. And it's just like, yeah, it's hard. But like today, just from these verses, I want to give you guys just 3 things to learn from this parable and about just sowing seeds. And can we actually first open back up to verses 3 to 9? I'll read these together. Excuse me. All right. He told many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen, a farmer went out to plant some seeds as he scattered them across his field. Some seeds fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plants soon wilted under the hot sun. And since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still, other seeds fell on fertile soil or good soil, and they produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Well, the first thing that I want to point out from these verses is the farmer. But who is the farmer actually? Well, the farmer here in these verses is talking about God. Which is also my first point. The farmer is God. And one of the things I want you guys to know is that from these verses is that God sows seeds into our lives. Can we say that together? God sows seeds. It's like a tongue twister. Okay. Oh, I lost my spot. Okay. And he sows many seeds in our lives. These seeds are, but the specific seeds that this parable is actually talking about is God's word. The Bible, from like Genesis to Revelation. That's the seeds that Jesus is talking about in this parable. But there are many other seeds that God can plant into our lives. One of the seeds that, like, especially in your ministry, you will realize that God plants seeds of talent. Like in whatever department you are, or maybe you're not even serving, but in your life, there are seeds that God plant into our lives that are talent, that are our talents. That's why you are more interested in certain things than other things. Like you like to work with computers, or some people like to like work with, with social media. They like to talk a lot. They're actually like very outgoing people. Some of you guys are maybe like more introverted like me. And, those are seeds in our lives. Other seeds are also just like, forgiveness, love, the fruits of the Spirit that is actually in our lives too, And I won't lie, like, again, I'll repeat it again, but like it took me so long to understand these verses. And I was actually telling Kevin when I sent my points to him, right? Like I had to like apologize to him. Like I felt so bad for sending my points in so late, because he's the one that like always makes the beautiful PowerPoints you see behind us or behind me. And like I just told him, bro, like I had these verses since like Tuesday, and I actually didn't give him the points until like Friday. So that's like what, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's like 3 days of me just like, yeah. You talk about like turning in your assignment late. Like I was late, and I was just lucky I had a nice teacher that was willing to give me full credit still. But yeah, and I think like on that Friday, like a couple days ago, I was talking to my dad, and my dad is actually one of the people that is like very close to me, that he usually helps me interpret these verses too, Man, like the conversation we had, it really felt like a light bulb moment, like I actually saw it in his face, like when he actually did like one of these. He's just like, oh my gosh, like that's what it means. I'm just like in my head too. I'm like, oh wait a minute, that's what it means. Like I'm telling you guys dive in the word, and then you guys just like keep learning and learning, and you have that drive to want to know what it means. It's just like you have that light bulb moment. It's just like, it's so good. But yeah, like I get that the farmer is supposed to be God, but like, well, what does that mean for me, And I won't also give my dad all the credit, because, true wisdom actually comes from God. But you think about it logically. If you are a farmer, you want to plant seeds. You need crops for food. Like here in these verses, it said that the farmer was like planting seeds in all the different soil. He didn't even like specifically plant it, but he just like threw it and just made sure that like it covered all the ground. If I was a farmer, I would choose to just put the seeds in the soil where it's fertile, where I know it's going to become fruitful. My seeds will become into a fruit tree, into vegetables or whatever it is. But then my dad told me, like, okay, you put yourself in the perspective of God. If he was a farmer, to like, why did he decide to plant seeds on all the soil, Here Jesus says that the farmer actually scattered the seeds all over the field, which means that he knows where the seeds are going. He sees that, okay, that's actually rocks, that's dirt, that's like really hard. There's thorny bushes, but that one's like the only good soil, Like this means he knows where the seeds are going. And this actually talks about the character of God, on who God is, on who Jesus is. And God, as a sower, he sows generously, scattering the seeds, even liberally, maybe even wastefully. And why is that? Because God is love, and his love is generous, and it is lavish and abundant, and he will not withhold the gospel, the word. He will not deny access of the good news from anyone, even when it looks like it's wasteful, even when it looks like it's sown into places where it won't grow or bear any fruit. That's our God. Well, the first thing I want to point out about these verses is that the farmer is God. It's a representation of God, of who he is. And now let's go back into verses 3 to 9. Or actually, we can just read verses, 4 to 9. I'll just read this so it'll be quick. And as he scattered them across his field, some seeds fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plants soon wilted under the hot sun. And since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still other seeds fell on fertile soil, and they produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. And anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Well, the next thing I want to point out that Jesus actually even lists on these verses is the soil. And the soil is actually a representation of our hearts. Can we say that together? The soil is our hearts. You are more than dirt. And you can, if you guys are curious and you guys want to read this again, after service or whatever, you go into verses 18 to 23, and Jesus literally just lists out what these verses actually mean. I actually read those parts too, and I still didn't get it. So that's my bad, Jesus. But yeah. Well, here Jesus talked about there's a few different kinds of soils, And in verses 4 to 8. As I said before, the different kinds of soils are actually representations of our heart. And I'm just going to tell you guys what each of the soil actually means. The footpath, that's the soil on the footpath where birds actually snatch up the seeds, that's a representation of people's hearts who have been hardened. When the ground is hard, seeds can't actually penetrate into the soil, so it's just left on the top of the soil. And at that point, when the heart is hard, it's the same thing with our hearts. If our hearts are hardened towards God, seeds from God cannot actually go into our hearts. And then in turn, it's actually snatched away by birds too. The seeds that God wants to plant into our lives are ended up being taken away by the devil, snatched away by Satan, who is the representation of those birds. The other soil is also shallow soil with underlying rock, and that pretty much means that, these seeds, they actually grow very fast. They grow immediately. But since their roots are not deep, they actually, the plants or whatever it is that's growing out of these seeds, they cannot stand the test of time and actually falls apart immediately. Same thing with our hearts. If our hearts are very shallow, when we only accept the message of Jesus at first glance, I love going to AGC. It's so nice, it's your first time here. And, at first, that's great. I hope you guys do enjoy it here at your first time. But what we also want you guys to do is to stay here and be planted. Why? Because when you only have shallow roots, when you're actually not deeply rooted in a local church, it doesn't even have to be AGC. If you are not rooted into a local church, but you're only there for the first time, and after that, it doesn't feel like, you don't get that same high as you came to church the first time, that means your roots are not planted deep enough. And when you hear the hard truths from the church, from sinning is bad or whatever it is, or whatever hard truth that actually, convicts you, it will actually make you to just not want to go to church anymore. Why? Because you feel like church has to be that first time when it's always happy. In truth, you go to church, you're in community, there is going to be bad times. There are going to be those moments where you do the hard talks with your community, with your close friends. Why? Because that actually makes you grow. That helps you grow, and that helps us grow deeper roots into Jesus, you know? And next one is, it talks about the thorns, you know, and the thorns is very interesting. Why? Because the seeds, actually, if you go into the verse, the seeds actually are in the soil, you know. It has deep roots. It has good roots. For some of us, that might look like people, you guys have been longtime members of the church, of AGC. You have deep roots in church. But the thorns actually talks about the message of Jesus is planted in your heart, but too quickly, it becomes crowded with the worries of life. It becomes crowded with temptations of life even, you know? Like, what does that look like? That looks like maybe you love to spend your time in the Word, but over time, maybe you have this New Year's resolution, you want to read the Word more and more, but over time, like, you just become distracted by other things, you know? You begin making up excuses to, I'm actually too busy today, I can't make it to church, or I'm too tired, I don't feel like reading the Bible today, or you just end up being distracted, like, you know, you just look at Instagram for like 5 hours doom scrolling, and you just lose track of time, and that's like, that's real, you know, that's real for a lot of us. And then there's the last soil that Jesus actually talked about is the good soil that represents those that whose hearts are very open to God, who will fully accept the seeds and let it grow in their lives. You know, as we can claim that we are good soil, you know, it's easy for God to, like, we can claim that it's easy for God to actually plant these seeds in our lives, but in reality, we're actually not good soil. Actually, not in first. But maybe you really claim you are the good soil that is very fruitful. You know, hey, you're better than me. I'm at least like, it's okay. At least for me, I'm at least a couple of these soils mixed into one. I'll just admit it. I do feel like I'm the thorny soil. I'm the one that I feel like I'm very deeply rooted in the church, but at the same time, life happens. You know, I like to check my phone. I like to be on Instagram. I like to make up excuses to why I actually don't have time to spend with God today. You know? And you know, the interesting thing is that God does see how your heart is. Like I said before about the farmer sees that all these different soils, but he chooses to give all the soils a fair chance and give all the soils seeds. As I've said in the previous point, God is love, and his love is so generous that he doesn't want us to hold back the good news from us. He plants seeds in all soil. He plants seed in our hearts. And we need to be willing to accept these kinds of seeds. We need to be willing to accept the gospel. We need to be willing to want to spend time with God in our day-to-day lives and not just on Sundays. Well, this brings me to my final point, which is the farmer works the soil. Can we say that together? 1, 2, 3. The farmer works the soil. So what does this point actually mean for us, you know? Like, as I said before, at first, none of us are good soil. At first, none of our hearts are good. And in the Bible, it even says that the heart is deceitful, the heart is evil. Many bad things come out from it. You know? Sorry. And with this said, you would think that our goals is to become good soil. Our goals is to have our hearts changed, like to work hard to make sure that we can have these seeds planted in our lives. But at the same time, that just makes the story of the gospel makes it about us, when in reality, it's the story of Jesus, you know? In reality, the farmer who is God, who is Jesus, he's the one that needs to work in our hearts. But he won't work in our lives unless we do accept the good news, unless we do accept the seeds that he does offer us. And can we open up to verses 10 to 13, and can we actually read these verses together? 1, 2, 3. His disciples came and asked him, "Why do you use parables when you talk to the people?" Even what little understanding they have will be taken away from them. That is why I use these parables, for they look, but they don't really see. They hear, but they don't really listen or understand. I actually read in a commentary like about these verses that I think someone said that parables, it's kind of a funny way to say it, but like parables are kind of like a joke where it has a punchline at the end where it actually like it hits home to you. And, you know, thing is with like jokes, sometimes people get it, sometimes people don't get it. And then maybe like for those people that don't get it, they ask like the comedian just like, "Yo, that's not funny, but can you actually explain it to me?" It's a little bit the same way with parables. You know, Jesus also doesn't just like use these parables just for fun, you know. He uses these parables to like catch the interest of people and also test them to see if they don't understand it, are they willing to make this next step to ask someone or ask God, like, "Can you help me understand this better? I want to know the good news. I know that there is something good in here, but I'm willing to take this next step to want to put in work to really understand it." You know, here you see that disciples actually just asked Jesus straight up, like, "Why do you use parables?" In verses 11 to 12, Jesus says, "You are permitted to understand the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but others are not. To those who listen to my teaching, more understanding will be given, and they will have an abundance of knowledge. But those who are not listening, even what little understanding they have will be taken away from them." And this is just how God changes our hearts. When we truly listen to God, when we truly accept Jesus, we will understand him more and more. You know, he just wants to know if we are willing to make time for him, if we are willing to, you know, if we are willing to just pray to him, go to AGC, go to Bible study, just to learn more about him, talk about it within our communities, about the life of being a Christian, you know, on how I can be saved, how I can actually like learn more about this man I call God. You know, Jesus also points out that those who are not listening, what little they know will also be taken from them. So now I want you guys to look at your left and right and ask your neighbor, "Are you listening right now?" Dang, I caught everyone's necks right now. All right. And also, I really like how Jesus also says we will have an abundance of knowledge, not just gain a little bit of understanding about who Jesus is, but an abundance. Because when God changes your heart, it won't just affect you, but it will affect the people around you. It will become an overflow where other people's lives will be changed, where it won't just be a story about you, but a story about Jesus changing you and using you to save more people also, you know? And as I've also said, if you choose to not listen, if you choose to not take that next step, to like even what little understanding they have will be taken away from them, you know? Well, like, what does this mean for me, Gil? Actually, before I answer that question, can I ask the worship team to come up? Sorry. But, well, what does this mean for me, Gil? If Jesus calls us to live as he lived, you know, Jesus is the prime example on how we should our lives, how a true Christian lives. You know, if Jesus calls us to live as he lived, we need to sow seeds the way he did. We need to sow seeds generously maybe even wastefully. Maybe this means to show love, not just where it's easy, but also where it might seem hard for you. Maybe this means to forgive people in our lives, such as your friends that's hurt you. Showing love to those people that you might not agree with. It could also be like forgiving members of your family who's hurt you, or forgiving those people in church that have hurt you, or showing love to the people that you don't know either. And can we actually open up to Romans 3 verses 23 to 26? These are going to be the last verses, I promise, guys. But can we actually read these verses together? 1, 2, 3. God presented Jesus as a sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed his life. Those who sinned times past. For he was looking ahead and including them in what he would do in this present time. God did this to demonstrate his righteousness, for he himself is fair and just, and he makes sinners in his sight. Jesus. It's like the whole thing about Jesus and Christianity, like, it actually doesn't make sense. It's like us reading the Bible and it's just like, it doesn't make sense. What kind of man, what kind of God actually has this much love, has this much forgiveness and passion just to save us? Because logically, that's a lot of time and energy. But in reality, like, Jesus is that man. Jesus is God that decided that, hey, we are worth it. Hey, he wants you to be saved. Like, the parable of the farmer is just like Jesus giving everyone a fair chance to be in the kingdom of heaven, but you won't actually get into the kingdom unless you choose to accept the seeds that God planted to your lives. Another thing I want to share is that when I was talking about these verses with my dad, that light bulb moment that we had, we just realized God probably knows that some of these seeds will not grow, but he chooses to plant them still. And then my dad just asked me the question, like, whose fault is it then if the seeds don't grow? Is it the fault of the farmer? Is it the fault of the seeds? Or is it the fault of the soil? In reality, it is the fault of the soil, but Jesus still knows that even if some of these seeds won't grow, he wants everyone to get a fair chance to be accepted into his kingdom, And here in verse 23, for everyone has sinned, we all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet God, in his grace, freely makes us right in his sight. He did this through Christ Jesus when he freed us from the penalty for our sins. He didn't want heaven without us. He didn't want heaven to be empty, because everyone out here is just struggling in this life. And I do firmly believe that even though we do fall short of God's glorious standard, God still wants us to come back to him. Maybe it feels discouraging at first, like, oh, I messed up, I sinned again, God. But like, it gives us a moment on how to react. Do you choose to run away from God, or do you choose to go back to God and just ask for forgiveness?